Got my old friend Bodie here. We're going to talk about some human optimization, maybe. I don't know what we're going to talk about. But I'm going to start off with a story. A lot of people don't know that Onnit wouldn't be called Onnit if it wasn't for us hanging out and saying that we were on it when we were actually on it. Maybe sometimes we weren't on it.
Several years ago,
back at the start, something we'd say. We'd say like, oh, man, I was on it. And it could have been at a bar, could have been on a ski run, could have been a variety of applications.
It's a broad term, but it had a very specific meaning.
Yeah.
It meant you were kicking ass, you were on it.
And so I had some really stupid name that I had originally designed for this company. And then I was like, you know what? It's out.
Yeah.
On it is in. And then such is it born. So if you like the brand, you can give a little dap to Bodie when you see him cruising around.
Yeah.
So dude, you exemplify a lot of different techniques, and I want to start getting into these. Some of the ones that, you kind of fell upon because of your childhood, and then some that you've developed on the more technical side, like the Katsu you put us through. But we're going to start at the beginning and just kind of go through some of these tools and try to give people some takeaways, how you've been able to do some of the relatively superhuman shit that you've pulled off in your life. So the first let's start off right from the beginning. Like, born in New Hampshire, natural ass birth, right?
Yeah, born at home. And I think one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot, which sets the groundwork for a lot of other things you do later, is being a little bit more connected to the earth. It sounds like a hippie term and real vague, but knowing the planet and knowing your place in it is a critical part of being connected to everything else and starting to feel in the flow of things and letting things happen the way they're supposed to happen. And growing up on the side of a mountain, more or less, in New Hampshire, where I didn't wear shoes, and for most of my life I didn't really like wearing clothes when I was little, so I kind of was pretty, and my parents were so mellow that they didn't really force anything on me. So I think I was much more able at a really young age, just by the force of nature, to find my place in things. I understood my own, my vulnerabilities, and I understood my strengths, and I was able to push myself. And I'm talking 1, 2, 3 years old, and that's the time when, once you have that foundation of kind of being really connected to the planet and, essentially building your animalistic nature as a human at the same time as developing your human nature. I think too many humans these days are only developing this real human nature and no animalistic nature. And there's components of both that I think are critical for a full life.
Absolutely. So, you come out, and right now kids and toddlers and infants are way overprotected, over babied. And we had Ben Greenfield on here and a lot of other research coming out about how the immune system is like a muscle. It has to be exercised, when you're a kid.
Yeah, especially when you're young.
If you're hand sanitizing absolutely everything, killing all that bacteria, first of all, if you haven't got set up with enough breast milk or, preferably a vaginal birth. I know there's sometimes you got to cut that thing out, but all of that sets the baby up, that wash of the vaginal bacteria, the little bit of poop that squirts out when everything's pushing as hard as possible. All that is helpful
when shit gets real.
And then carrying that on and like being out in nature, like getting around in the dirt, and maybe you stick a dirty finger in your mouth. Like, that's
There's
part
no
of
question.
being a kid.
I ate everything. I tested everything firsthand, and and that's the other part, is you learn about, these mushrooms at a young age. A white mushroom was don't eat. My dad was was early. It was like,
yeah.
And when you're out there doing things, you can understand that. When you're in a room, you expect everything to be so sterile and fine that parents are supposed to only give you things that you can attempt to put in your mouth. They don't fit, or they're because the FDA or whatever said, oh, these are fine to give to anybody. No one can choke possibly on this thing, and I think it rules out a lot of self-exploration and some learning parts that are really important.
Yeah. So then, all right, advancing a little bit past that, and the results are, well, first of all, I've hung out with you plenty of times, and we'll go out and we'll have a sketchy meal, like some sketchy sushi, and you'll look at it like, yeah, it's sketchy, but I can fucking handle it. Like, I can take that down and it's not a problem. Yeah. Whereas if I even got it near my plate, like if I touched it, like the osmosis would give me like a stomach infection, So, but whatever you did back in those days helped set up some kind of immune system.
But I think, like I said, I think the foundation as well, and you and I spoke a little bit about this, there's a collective energy or collective consciousness that also, germs and every little amoeba and thing on the planet is connected to the same thing. And if you're able to connect to that, your body prepares you for it in every other way. It's not just the germs you put in your mouth, but it's a collective, aspect that,
Yeah.
that allows you to prepare for things that you would never encounter except for, one or two times. And if you're in that mode where you're in the zone, you can kind of fight them off a
Well,
little better maybe.
that's harnessing belief as well. Studies on the nocebo, placebo, what you believe is putting in, and that's certainly, I think, so some of it is that innate exposure that you've got,
Yeah,
and some of it is that you're a wizard in manipulating your mind. We'll probably get into that as you get older. But then, all right, so really young though, you were chomping up the mountain and decided to just hike up, ski down, and not a lot of kids would have been doing that. So what was that about?
We lived up on the side of a mountain, so the natural way to get down was sledding or skiing, or we had snurfboards. I don't know if anyone remembers snurfers. They were like a snowboard with no bindings. They just had staples that stuck out of the board a little bit. They were supposed to provide you some grip for your Sorels or whatever you stood on the thing with, and it had a string that came off the front of the board that you held onto. And those people who are old enough to remember those probably had an awesome time on them, because those were my favorite. But you couldn't turn because you had no way to apply. They were only wood. The whole thing was wood. But I could make it I don't think I ever successfully made it down my trail on one, but I made it far and going fast and just absolutely ragdolled myself a million times. But those are the early, it was more by necessity. But then as a kid, I loved playing. I just, everything I had to do, I figured out ways to make it fun. So, the natural way down any slope for me was sliding or running, and flipping and crawling and
Right.
smashing myself. And then, that kind of adapted into skiing as I got the equipment.
Yeah, it's funny. There's like almost a universal appeal to that sliding motion. There's even like YouTube videos of these birds that have figured out how to like take a lid of something and they'll bring it up to like a steepled kind of
On a rooftop and hop on it and
they'll
slide
hop
down.
on it and slide down. And
Have you
keep
seen
doing
that? It's unbelievable. It's
Yeah.
crows and all kinds of
Crows,
things.
yeah.
And you can see it with otters and lizards. And I mean, there's a million different animals that have figured it out, and they just have a great time doing it. It's like, we don't have ownership of that.
That universal appeal of just feeling these forces.
Yeah, playing.
Playing. Yeah, exactly. So when did it go from, kind of playing to, all right, this is something a little more serious?
I started shifting gears pretty early, like 9, 10 years old. I was pretty much determined that I knew at that point I didn't like work. I'd had to do a lot of work. My life was filled with hard work, chopping wood, moving wood, doing tennis courts, weeding, and doing chores, trying to make money. So I realized that I didn't like work. I wasn't cut out for it. I decided I had to figure out a better way to make money.
Uh-huh.
And I had some really interesting people in my life, gave me really honest, clear feedback, and I decided that there was nothing standing in my way except my determination, my stubbornness, and my, in the end, certainly if I had a limiting physical attribute, maybe that would stand in my way. But it was really, I was pretty confident that I was going to be at least in the right range to be able to, participate in sports at a professional level. So, and I knew my mind was strong enough. So I pretty much focused from that point on doing the steps. But and I think I was probably more patient than most kids my age, where I knew that it wasn't going to happen right away. I said, how old are people when they're professional? And I said, probably 19. The early guys are 16, 17.
Mm-hmm.
The later normal guys are 20, 21, 22. Some guys are even 25. And I said, sweet. So I got a bunch of time. I'm going to need it.
Yeah.
And I went about kind of systematically trying to get better at stuff. And that's why I had such disdain for coaching, because coaches wanted you to be good right then. They wanted you good that season. No one was looking at 10 years down the line, which is the only place I was looking. I didn't care if I was winning races when I was 11 years old. I didn't get shit for those. I was getting crappy little pins that said you won first place,
But how do you get that perspective, though? Because most kids live for these little medals and these little.
Because I didn't want to work,
yeah.
and I.
So that was your guiding star.
Yeah, and I just saw that the steps they wanted me to take that would have provided a little bit more immediate gratification were out of line with what it was going to take to make the end steps. I would have had to do those end steps anyway. I thought I was going to run out of time. So, and for me, the way that I looked at my ability, I knew I had to build on the parts I had to build on. It was obvious to me. I needed to be stronger. But I needed that killer instinct. That was my biggest strength, was my mental component, that I was willing to push and do more than anyone else. So, I made sure that I thought about it a lot. I mean, granted, some of my experiences with mushrooms and stuff helped me, because I was able to kind of more or less meditate on it and walk.
Sure.
Most kids, I think myself included, without that, I would have lost focus. I wouldn't have been able to run through all the steps out to 15 or 20 years in advance. That just, it takes too much time, and it's too hard for a young kid. I would, start playing with myself or something, It was like, but on those times where I got in the right mindset and focused, I could see far enough into the future what the steps had to be, where I was going to suffer, where I was going to struggle, what steps I had to make, where the main challenges were going to be, where the real danger zones were going to be, where, for me, it was, I knew I had to keep healthy. If I got hurt, that was the problem for me. So, it's risky with my tactics and all that stuff. So,
well, you opened the door. I didn't know if you were going to open the door, but since you did, so early on, you had some exposure to, psilocybin up in New Hampshire. It was just something that naturally grows. It was part of your natural environment.
Yep.
And so it wasn't this weird thing that everybody thinks, oh my God.
Right. And it wasn't, exactly. It
It
wasn't considered doing drugs. You just, it was, exactly. It was part of our,
for something.
Yeah, it was part of our environment.
So then that allowed you to have, even at a younger age, a perspective that most people don't even approximate, if they have never been to that. So did that help facilitate your killer instinct, or did you have that and then that gave you the vision, and that was kind of like the merger?
Well, I think I hadn't had the right circumstances. I think I had it as an innate part of my character, because I was a all boy. Like I would go out in the snow barefoot and just walk around just to see how tough I was. Like I was, I was that way from when I was a baby. I didn't cry much. I didn't complain. I just toughed it out all the time. And so I think I had parts of that, but then as you start to recognize what parts of your, and again, this was all probably the only difference. Most people come to these same conclusions. It just sometimes takes a bit longer. And that's where I think, things like psilocybin can really help you to accelerate that process. Cause I just came to these conclusions much earlier. I said, look, I got a bunch of parts of my character and my nature that are going to hold me back in a huge way. And I got to be able to get through those. It's a brutal process, and of self-recognition and self-analysis, and but I said, here's the parts that I think are really strong, and those were those I built on. I built on them intentionally and on purpose, and I put myself in situations that caused me to have to adapt to a more extreme version, so that under pressure, in the midst of a lot of different input and a lot of different exposures, I was able to still maintain that like killer instinct that has helped me to win races. It's also helped me to crash a lot, but I think in the end, it's what brought me to where I am, and I wouldn't change it for a million. I wouldn't change it at all.
Yeah, that seems to be a theme that started early and then, extended on, is putting yourself in really disadvantageous situations and then seeing like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. Because that's what ski racing is. It's an incredibly disadvantageous situation. You got to go fucking 80 miles an hour on incredible G-force.
Yeah, and especially when that, it's everyone's going to tell you over and over again that 80% is what you should be doing to win the race. They'll just tell you that, and they'll sell you on it. You can't make mistakes. No mistakes at 80% is going to beat, several mistakes at 100% some of the time, most of the time maybe, but you're much more likely to make it to the finish at 80%. Right. So they'll sell you on that. And the fact is that would erode my most sacred belief in sports and in life in general, which is you got to send it. Like there's no value in a victory that has no heart involved. And so I learned that early enough that I was able to resist that, temptation to
that counter force.
To do what all these coaches and everyone was kept telling me, even under the most extreme circumstances. In World Cup slalom, I went 2 complete seasons without finishing a single slalom. I DNF'd in every single race. 2 complete seasons.
Is that a record?
And it's a record. No one's even come close. Not even close. No one's ever made 1 season, let alone 2 back to back. And this is during a time when I had the speed to win races. And so I was just getting absolutely hammered on by everyone. And they were like, they couldn't believe my resilience to their pressures. How do you keep doing the same thing when we keep telling you that this is what's going to happen? I said, because you're correct. It is what's going to happen until I figure it out. And when I figure it out, I'm going to start winning races. And sure enough, the next year I went and won 4 races in a season, and it shut everyone up. And I was happy with the way I did it. So.
Yeah, you look at these trends that have, benefited you, this resistance to outside forces. Sometimes the outside forces have been good, but you've had resistance.
Right.
Most of the time it's been shitty. So it's generally
you kind of got to, yeah, exactly. You throw up a hard armor barrier, and that's, it absolutely can be to your detriment, but in most cases in my instance, because I take things and I think them through, and I'm pretty thoughtful anyway. Right. And again, that's a skill that I've learned over the years is to process things and not just instantly block them away because they're coming from the outside, because a lot of
Right.
good outside ideas need to be let through.
Well, you had a way to actually tap into your own highest wisdom. You know, these places where you could get still, either on the mountain or, you know, through that occasional encounter with the psilocybin mushroom, or through any of these other modalities that you do. You did a lot with hot and cold therapy, and that'll bring you to, you know, like the ancient sweat lodges or temazcals.
Yeah.
It'll bring you to a real heightened state. So all these tools allow you to really have a clear picture. And then once you have a clear picture, you can't count on the rest of the world to have that same clear picture. So you got to be able to resist those
Yeah,
counter
you have to
pressures.
be
You got
able
to
to.
resist your parents, your girlfriend, your all of the society, the matote, as the Toltecs say. You got to be able to resist that in order to stay true to that vision, which is your truest vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it is a challenge, because the older you get, you know, things do they start to encroach a little bit, and they try to beat you down. But yeah, if you can recognize that, you know, the one person you really have to answer to is yourself anyway, that kind of gives you a little bit more of that, you know, that internal strength to just, you know, because again, like it's a learning process of letting go of some of that ego that sort of wants to just be stubborn and hold on to everything that you say
Right.
and block everyone else out. And then, but also maintaining the, you know, the knowledge that other people's perspective, while valuable, you know, shouldn't supersede your own.
Right. The ego tends to disappear when you're in a 220-degree sauna for about 30 minutes. So.
It does.
I
You
mean,
can
it's one of
drive.
those
You can drive it away. It wants nothing to do with that
No,
kind of suffering.
It wants out.
Yeah, and that's physical suffering is a real good way to drive the ego away, because it likes mental suffering, not physical suffering.
Right.
So, you know, you can clear things out pretty quickly with hot, cold, or intense focus. Any of the, you know, there's a million different natural ways to do it that are, you know, I've used most of them, and I you know, I've been a huge benefactor.
Yeah. I remember one thing you told me once, and we were talking about kind of the mental aspect of what you do to prepare. And you talked to me about getting a song stuck in your head. You know, like, I refuse to fucking let a song get stuck in my head. Like, I will override that tendency and not allow that to happen, because that means there's something going on mentally that's out of my control. Like, take us through, like, how did you get to that point where you could exert that amount of control, and why?
Well,
you do
it came from my older sister, who, I love her to death, but she was a Looney Tune when I was little. She had imaginary friends, and like, for a while I didn't understand what that was, but then I'd hear her, and she would always be humming, you know, similar songs and throughout the day. So I'd start in the morning, we'd go to school, she'd be doing the same one coming home, and it'd drive me crazy. And I asked her about it a bunch of times, and she said that a song would get stuck in her head, and I was like, yeah, but doesn't that get annoying after like the second time? Like, maybe you even like the song, but still after a couple minutes. And I recognized at that point that what I did was, because I was bored, or I didn't like the idea that something was, that was out of my control, or that my mind was playing games that I didn't really want to participate in. And instead of just letting it play the game and letting it run my mouth and stuff, I would make it go away. So the song might still be playing, but I made the song so far away in my head, I just closed it down to such a small degree, and I put my mind or my inspiration onto something else that drew my attention there. And, you know, I don't know if the song is still playing somewhere in the background somewhere, but it was out of my mind. It was completely, I would draw my focus to something new, and it was a skill that ended up paying off through every component of my life, because it really, you know, it worked for everything from, you know, nerves, from focus to, you know, distractions in school, to, you know, pre-race routines, to, you know, to girls, to, you know, anything. It really, being able to control what your mind does and not lose the ability to be at peace and settle things down if you need to, if you're nervous. And that's exactly the way you do it. You just take it, you bundle it up, and you put it in one place, and you draw your focus to somewhere else, and then you put some intensity and some passion into that focus, and all of a sudden whatever's outside that little sphere of focus is gone. And you can, all of a sudden everything drops. Heart rate, breathing, in your mind, everything just settles, you become still, and then you can do whatever you want at that point.
It's taking control of the starship. You know, it's
Exactly.
like, that's like the key thing. You want to talk about human optimization, what's the most important thing you can do is take control of the starship. If you've seen that movie Lucy, you know, for example, I don't know if you saw it. It's an all right movie, but one of the cool premises is a certain level of brain function, she starts to be able to control her body. So the autonomic systems, everything that's out of your control, you can control. The secretion of hormones to that. And so you get the starship to do exactly what you want. Well, we can't get to that Lucy level, but you've tapped into a far, far higher level than your competitors, than most of the world. And that's been one of your greatest strengths, is be able to push past physical exertion levels, push past mental situations, and demand more that way, because to a greater degree, you're controlling this incredible apparatus that we have.
And again, I think I'm just not, I don't put any time into it. I don't really think, you're right. We probably can't get to the Lucy levels. Hollywood tends to stretch things, but I really don't think there's too much of a limitation. I believe if you really were to focus on it for your whole life and develop the skills and put the time into it and use every resource available, I think you could get to a point where you could truly control most of your body. Because I do it with injuries and stuff like that, where I'll focus on it hard enough, and I know I'm helping to change the process that would naturally be considered out of my control. It's just, you just have to let your body do it. And I'm like, why don't I help it?
Yeah.
And I know that works. And I'd be surprised that there wasn't a whole level that we haven't got to yet.
No doubt about it. So let's talk about, I know you got to catch a flight, unfortunately. We could probably talk for 8 hours, as we often have on many different occasions. But let's go through some of the most important modalities that have helped you and continue to help you, particularly on the physical side, as we talked about some of the mental side.
Yeah. I would say the stuff, doing the cryo chamber was a great example of something that's a new technology, more or less. It's not new, but it's new in terms of, something that is now available to the average person that can have a huge impact on their life and on their, their physical state, their mental state, can allow them to progress through a training routine, can allow them to do things. And, what I brought here to you is this KAATSU training methodology, and that I think fits in with exactly what we've been talking about. It's just an easy kind of new technology that can absolutely change the way you view training or health or fitness and mental toughness and the ability to commit to being healthy and enhancing your life. And I think it's been fun to be here for a couple days and run some people through it, because it's always surprising. This KAATSU it's shocked a lot of people, myself included. And now I've come back from basically 2 injuries using it most of the time, and prepared for racing World Cup and World Championships using exclusively KAATSU, where in the past I was doing huge amounts of damage to my body to prepare to race World Cup because the training was so hard and so vigorous and the repetition was so high. And this, I think, is able to reverse some of those long-standing injuries, the nagging injuries that I had, at the same time as building my fitness. It's been unbelievable. But
yeah, I got the pleasure to jump on that, and I'll tell about my experiences. But people have no idea what KAATSU is, so give them the 2-minute elevator.
Yeah, KAATSU is restricted blood flow. So it's these bands. They're similar to a blood pressure cuff, but they're a little bit elasticy, and they go around your arms, and then you pump air into them using a regulator, a little computerized regulator, and it measures the amount of air pressure that's in these bands, and you get them to an optimal level based on allowing some circulation through to your arms. You don't completely cut the circulation off. You want blood flow to the arm, but just slightly less than normal. And then you go through and you do just regular body weight exercises, really low impact stuff. So 5 pounds to curl. You can do push-ups. You can do seated dips, or tricep extensions with a 2-pound weight. And because the muscle contraction actually helps to push blood out of your arms, out of the appendage that's restricted, the blood doesn't return well in it. So your muscle runs out of fuel, it runs out of oxygen and muscle glycogen really quickly. So your first set is pretty normal. Your second set is much worse, and your third set you go to failure really, really quickly. And because you're going to absolute failure without damaging the muscle fibers, your central nervous system gets a really strong failure response. So the end result of this is the effects you would get from a max weight workout. And that max weight workout would normally damage your body. It would damage the connective tissue, damage the muscle fibers, damage the bone surface. You always have soft tissue damage. And so your body would release a bunch of hormones and enzymes and things to go and repair that damage, and growth hormone and testosterone and all the things that would help your body to recover and super compensate for that workout. And it would use those resources up fixing the damage that you did. But in this case, because there's no damage, you didn't damage the muscle fibers, you didn't damage the connective tissue because there was no real strain on any of those things. All these resources that are released in your body can go to fixing things that are old, recurring injuries or wear and tear stuff, and you get a little bit of a super compensation curve where your energy is great and you recover really quickly. And you can do this exercise. You can do KAATSU on your arms, and then you do it on your legs separately. And it takes about a half an hour, and you can do it 2 times a day. So in a matter of 2 weeks, I was able to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 workouts. And 30 workouts of, as you can imagine, if you're doing max weights, upper and lower body, 30 upper body max weight
doing all
workouts.
the stuff that you used to do, like putting on a 100-pound pack and sprinting up a hill, or whatever
even
the
30,
hell that
30
was.
roller pushes. I mean, it would take you 3 months to do 30 of those because you just can't do them in close succession like that. So I think, for me, I think it's the most revolutionary training modality I've ever seen. And I think the interesting thing is I've seen it used. My father-in-law uses it. He has heart disease and has 5 stents in his heart. And you put it on, and he's able to do super moderate exercises with no risk. They have a bunch of scientific papers on the process. There's no risk really at all, and you can do really light exercise, and your central nervous system believes you're doing much harder exercise, builds new vasculature. Your body can actually build sort of natural bypasses for your heart. It builds extra vasculature around to make sure the heart gets blood, and really reverse the effects of some of these long-term heart disease issues. And
plus all that kind of hormone dump. What I felt, this is the ultimate kind of hack. You talk about controlling the starship, right? We can't push the button that says, okay, just release a bunch of growth hormone because everything feels a little shitty right now. Release a bunch of these things. But this is a way to kind of hack into that body system and trick it into doing something that is, vastly beneficial for the body.
And again, as we've used some of these tools throughout our lives to sort of enable us to understand what the process is, and then be able to redo that process without the modality that we used. In some cases, some of my thought processes that may have happened when I was on mushrooms at one time or another, I've been able to kind of learn from that and use some of those processes here. And I'm confident that this is the same thing. I think it's a great hack and it's a great tool to use. And I think we're going to be able to learn from it, inside of our body, and get our body to do different things with different exercises as we move forward. So
yeah, no doubt. So that's, I did the workout, and just getting to that full anabolic state where it felt like everything was shaky and like I just went through the most brutal workout, or I just rolled, hour and a half on the jiu-jitsu mats, and everything is just bone weary, but without the joint pain and this kind of deficit that you feel where you just can't get enough food to feel right.
And in about 20 minutes. That's what's unbelievable.
It's pretty cool. So there's that. There's the hot cold therapy. There's, obviously you've ventured into the psilocybin practices. All of these things have contributed to, what you see in the highlight reel, which is the wins, the crashes, the lifetime career. But really it's been, yourself deciding what you wanted out of your life, and then applying fairly all the best tools that you could.
Yeah, using everything at your that you have, every resource that's available to explore the journey and make it worthwhile and make it fun. I've been very lucky and very fortunate, and I've been very cognizant and thoughtful about the process as well. And I think it's unbelievable. The time we live in right now, with how many of these resources and how easy it is to spread knowledge at this point, how quickly we can spread, and how many people there are out there who are not selfish, who want to share when they find something amazing that helps their life. And, they're like, they don't need to necessarily try to make money off it or capitalize or hide it from anybody and be greedy. They just share it. And now, everyone has the ability to kind of try and test things out and see how much they can improve and how good they can make their life. And I think we're in a special time right now.
Agreed. And one really cool thing that I've learned from you is I've watched you in a variety of situations, and you will get just as fired up watching some everyday individual stretch to that little extra bit of their potential, whether it's been me one time on the dance floor. It's been, our buddies out playing basketball that aren't very good that just reach this level. And to you, that's as exciting as watching, some of the top performers in the world do it. And I think that really applies to everybody listening here. It's not about being a gold medal world champion ski racer. It's about, reaching these little moments that stretch yourself to a little bit more than what you're capable of.
And you can, and as you get further into that, you can literally sense it. It's what inspiration is built of, and everyone knows it instinctually. I mean, again, I talk about my friend Cam, who's in a wheelchair, and how obvious it is to people when they see someone who's in a wheelchair do something inspirational, and it's not particularly hard because they're working with sometimes paralysis from the waist down or the nipples down or whatever, and for them it's obviously hard, but the end result isn't anything super magical. But watching somebody push that hard and have to put in that much effort and dig as deep as they have to dig in some points to get something done, it's inspirational, and it's inspirational for every of the top athletes in the world that I've ever watched. They've witnessed some of these actions that and so I think people get a little confused between that sometimes. Like, it's obvious in some cases, but not in other cases. And they think an able-bodied person should have to do something spectacular, like LeBron James or something like that, right, to be impressive. And the reality is, just watching somebody truly dig deep without an agenda, without any ego involved, and trying to posture themselves, just truly digging for whatever their body and their mind can produce, is that it's what inspiration is built of.
That's what Onnit's about, my friend. That's it. Thank you, Bodie.
Absolutely.
We'll
Thanks for having me,
my brother. And,
I shall be back.
You'll be back. I look forward to it. Everybody, adios. Much love. Peace.